Welcome to WHRO's Weekly Edition. I'm Doug Boynton. In this week's program, there are a lot of moving parts in the Richneck Elementary shooting story. I sat down with WHRO News Director Mechelle Hankerson to put together what we know and what's left to discover.
Charges like this could actually make it harder for school staff to step in to try to prevent gun violence in schools.
60 years ago this week, the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel opened. Connor Worley jumps into the time machine to break down how it came to be. And with a need for shipbuilders, WHRO's Barry Graham explains how a new competition is showcasing career opportunities for students. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. Is it dead or just dying? Either way, Norfolk hopes to redevelop MacArthur Center into a major mixed-use development anchored by a 400-room hotel. WHRO's Ryan Murphy reported the story.
Norfolk Mayor Kenny Alexander said during his State of the City speech that the redevelopment would feature high-rise residential, a soaring hotel, and a large pedestrian promenade with indoor-outdoor dining and shopping.
By optimizing existing assets, we aim to solidify Norfolk as a premier hub for business, living, hospitality, tourism, elevating our city's appeal to residents and visitors alike.
It's unclear how far along the plan is, how much of the existing mall would be repurposed, or if the city has a developer lined up. The area around MacArthur has changed as retailers and restaurants left the mall. Over the last decade, the number of people living downtown has tripled. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
A former assistant principal at Richneck Elementary School in Newport News was indicted for felony child neglect last week for ignoring warning signs before a 6-year-old shot his teacher last January. It's a rare move, but the entire grand jury report was released, and it leads to more questions and maybe more investigations. I spoke with WHRO News Director Mechelle Hankerson about what was in the report. Let's start with the grand jury report. There was a lot in there. A judge allowed the whole report to be released. Is that common?
That's not common. So in Virginia, typically we just get a charge sheet. We don't get a full grand jury report. But Newport News Commonwealth's attorney Howard Gwynn said the day after the report, he made sure to emphasize that the panel of citizens who were on this jury thought it was really important that everyone got all of these details about the day of the shooting, the information about what preceded the shooting, and not just preceded the day of, but the months leading up to the shooting.
I've never heard of a school administrator being charged. Parents, the case in Michigan, yeah, but a school administrator, has that ever happened before?
Not that we know of, not a school administrator. We do know that an SRO, a school resource officer in Parkland down in Florida, was charged and then acquitted. But this hasn't happened in Virginia, the best we can tell. Howard Gwynn, again, Commonwealth's attorney, says that he has never charged a school administrator with child neglect before, which is what Parker is being charged with, Ebony Parker. He has been in office 11 years. So for at least 11 years in Hampton Roads, we have never seen this. We don't really know if this is a proven way to prevent gun violence in schools. WHRO's Ryan Murphy talked to William & Mary's Jeff Bellin, who is a law professor and former prosecutor himself. He says charges like this could actually make it harder for school staff to step in to try to prevent gun violence in schools. And this is what Bellin said about that.
If you do prosecute someone for not taking steps in a certain situation, other school administrators are going to notice that, and that puts a lot of pressure on them to step in. And then if on the flip side, if you're stepping in too soon, you're getting sued civilly or getting in trouble with other law enforcement agencies, you put the administrators in an impossible position.
So Gwen also said, for his part, that he really wasn't looking at this as a larger issue or battle. He was looking at this as an individual case. He said that his office had evidence to file charges against Parker, and so they did. So he really wasn't looking at this about to stake a claim about school violence and gun violence. He had evidence to charge Parker, and he did.
There was a mention of missing documents. What do we know about those documents?
The documents became a really big part of this report because it's something that could lead to further investigation and potentially further charges. So after the shooting happened, investigators wanted to see files related to the student who shot Abby Zwerner. And what investigators found was that the student's general file was missing. And best we can tell is that this is the file that keeps primarily disciplinary records, is what investigators were looking for. So they asked to see them. They were looking for copies in the main office, and they knew that there should have been copies in Abby Zwerner's classroom. They could not locate either copy. Eventually, the request got up to the district's director of elementary school leadership, Lakeisha Parrott, and she wasn't able to provide it at first. She said it was in her car. She said it was in her house. She couldn't explain why it would be in those places. Eventually, she provided it, but it was missing all of the disciplinary records related to that student, which is what investigators wanted to see. For example, they knew that there should have been an incident report in there from 2021 when the child choked a teacher, not Zwerner, but a different teacher. They could not find that in the student's file that Parrott provided. And the only reason they know that that file should have been in there is because that teacher who was choked by the student was able to provide her own copy. And then that second file that was supposed to be in Zwerner's classroom was actually never found. And Diane Toscano, Zwerner's lawyer, says that her and Zwerner didn't know about the missing documents until the grand jury report. So this isn't an issue of Zwerner misplaced something in her classroom. They think something else was going on. And this is what Toscano had to say the day after the report was released.
As we're going through the special grand jury report, that's when it became real that there were lots of things missing. Did we suspect things had happened? Certainly, but this confirmed it.
Did Abby return to her classroom at any point after the shooting?
She returned once at the end of the school year to help get her classroom ready, as you do as a teacher, and we were given a trespass letter.
And Toscano also said at that press conference, it sounds like to her, there's probably grounds for a larger state or federal investigation.
Well, Howard Gwynn said it's not over too, right?
He did say that. He said that the grand jury related to Ebony Parker and the child neglect charges is done. The charges are filed. That court proceeding is underway. But he also said they are continuing to investigate the issue of the missing documents, and this is what he said specifically.
What we'll do is we'll work with the school system to try to ferret out how this happened. And based on the facts and the law, if we believe somebody else needs to be charged, then trust me when I tell you they will be charged.
So that could lead to nothing. That could lead to charges. It could lead to the school system just making some changes internally. Only time will tell.
Only time will tell.
Only time.
Thanks for explaining this for us.
Of course. Yeah, it was a busy week.
And we should mention Newport News Public Schools are stakeholders in Horetta, which holds the license for the WHRO stations. The North Carolina Court of Appeals says Governor Roy Cooper violated the Constitution with some of his COVID-19 restrictions back in 2020. We get details from WUNC's Colin Campbell.
The ruling came Tuesday in a lawsuit from a trade group representing bars. In the early months of the COVID pandemic, Cooper's administration reopened restaurants but kept bars closed. Bars argued they could follow the same social distancing rules as restaurants, but Cooper said people were more likely to be close together in a bar setting, making it harder to avoid spreading the virus. The appeals court ruled there was no scientific evidence to suggest that bars posed a bigger risk than restaurants if social distancing rules were in place. The panel of Republican judges noted that the Cooper administration's evidence consisted of news articles found through internet searches. The ruling does limit how much compensation bars could receive from the lawsuit. The judges say the forced closure didn't equate to the government seizing private property, and they sent the case back to a lower court for further review. I'm Colin Campbell.
Part of the former Lambert's Point golf course in Norfolk has reopened as a public green space. WHRO's Catherine Hafner reports that it all comes after tireless efforts by residents.
Brian Friedman and his husky, Sky, are standing near the clubhouse at the former Lambert's Point course. Just beyond, paths originally meant for golf carts stretch up into grassy hills.
Ahead of us is 15 acres of city-owned public green space conserved as our new city park.
Friedman lives in Larchmont and has long enjoyed walking here along the riverfront. When the golf course closed last year to make way for a new sewage plant, he helped form a committee to push the city to preserve the 15 acres that remain.
This is the last publicly owned waterfront parcel in the city inventory, and we didn't want to lose it.
Now, Friedman wants Norfolk to confirm whether all 15 acres will stay public. City officials say they don't know yet. Norfolk's proposed budget includes about $30,000 for basic things like landscaping at the site. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Monday marked the 60th anniversary of the opening of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. WHRO's Connor Worley takes us back to the beginning.
Day after day of the same laborious routine. Load, lift, secure, seal. Monotonous, but each day the progress on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel was visible. Suddenly, the construction needed to cease. A powerful nor'easter barreled toward the uncapped trestles and exposed construction in the Chesapeake Bay. It slammed into the open water site on March 7, 1962, what's now known as the Ash Wednesday storm. 1 month later, the Virginian pilot reported that it stripped away huge quantities of man-made fill and protective sand. It upended one tunnel section and destroyed the main pile driver named Big D.
They had to salvage the main components of that to construct a new pile driver.
Tom Anderson is the deputy executive director with the CBBT. He says certain obstacles like extreme weather just can't be avoided.
It was certainly a major setback in the construction process.
The ensuing 3.5-month delay was yet another in a long line of weather events and construction holdups that pushed the bridge tunnel's opening half a year later than originally planned.
The Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel.
It's formally known as the Lucius J. Kellum Jr. Bridge Tunnel, named after the man who spearheaded the project, and it opened 60 years ago on April 15, 1964. In 1956, the General Assembly authorized the Commission to conduct surveys for a fixed crossing. The studies concluded that a crossing was feasible, and engineers recommended a series of bridges and tunnels similar to the recently completed Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. Prior to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, travelers had two options to navigate between Tidewater, Virginia and the Eastern Shore: take a ferry across the Chesapeake Bay, or take a circuitous 7-hour drive up, over, and down.
The traffic volumes had built up to the point where a fixed crossing appeared to be necessary. When the construction first began, the volumes on the ferry system were up to about 750,000 vehicles per year.
A 1956 Virginian pilot article said that Eastern Shore residents universally approved legislation that would kickstart the bridge.
It would be a major inconvenience if the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel didn't exist. The trips on the ferry systems took 85 minutes on a good day.
The commission eventually secured funding without using any tax revenue. Construction began in October 1960. 78-year-old Betsy Agelasto remembers the buzzing excitement around Hampton Roads as the bridge was being built.
Everybody was really excited because it connected everybody. A lot of people had friends and relatives over there, but once the bridge opened up, it meant you had a north-south thing for what they were growing on the Eastern Shore.
Construction was multifaceted. The pile drivers started things off by pile driving concrete pillars into the ocean's floor to set the trestles in place across 17.6 miles of open water. The trestles were capped, then a slab setter traversed the trestles, laying prefabricated sections of a roadway to connect the disparate parts into one continuous road. Large ditches were dug for the tunnels. Then, large, pre-constructed sections of the tunnel were lowered from the barges. Once the sections were aligned, divers would bolt them together. Water was then completely pumped out. Finally, the tunnels were covered with earth and artificial islands were made.
There were all kinds of challenges. Just lining up the facility was a challenge that necessitated having survey towers built. So there were 9 towers that were about 100 feet high that were spaced across the mouth of the bay just so they could see over the curvature of the earth in order to properly align the facility.
At one point in April 1961, operation engineers stepped off the site and formed a worker strike. Equipment sat idle in the tubes. A Norfolk Ledger Dispatch article from the time said the reasons were, quote, travel pay to the base site of work, and the size of the work crews. Increases in both were agreed upon, and the strike ended after nearly 1 month. Any given day, crews had to deal with rough currents, eddies, and high winds. Storms and extreme weather events routinely halted assembly.
Those kinds of things are, just going to happen in this type of harsh marine environment.
Before it opened, Agelasto and her grandfather, a long-serving member of the Virginia Highway Commission, toured the tunnel.
We rode the elevators down to where the blowers were down in the tunnel, and we went, at that point, there was a Chesapeake Bay Bridge building over there with the most incredible paintings of the Eastern Shore you've ever seen.
Her thoughts were echoed throughout Eastern Virginia when the bridge tunnel finally opened 3.5 years after construction started. 900 vehicles used the bridge tunnel on its first night of operation. It now serves over 4.3 million vehicles each year. The mid-1990s brought another significant development to the bridge tunnel. A new 2-lane bridge system was built parallel to the existing structure. It increased traffic flow and divided northbound and southbound traffic. The bridge will continue to morph in the future. A new dualization project is expected to open in 2027. A parallel Chesapeake Channel tunnel is expected to open around 2040. Connor Worley, WHRO News.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
This week, an international nonprofit came to the Elizabeth River Project in Norfolk to host a climate change workshop. WHRO's Catherine Hafner was there.
The workshop is called a climate fresque, short for fresco. Like a sprawling European fresco painting, participants make a collage of cards that each represent aspects of climate change. The Norfolk group had to figure out the relationship between things like rising temperatures, melting glaciers, and sea level rise.
You could say rising temperatures causes sea level rise because of expanding of water that could melt the ice.
And which human activities contribute the most to climate change.
Industry is 40% of greenhouse gases. Transportation is actually a little less than I thought.
Facilitator Heather Noreen says they also want to highlight solutions.
The whole goal is not actually that they know everything about climate change. It's that they leave the room thinking, there's things I can do.
She hopes the workshop helps people see the bigger picture. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
And now from yesterday to today, where crews are working on tomorrow's big deal water crossing, the Virginia Department of Transportation celebrated a major breakthrough in the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel expansion project on Wednesday. Crews finished digging the first of 2 new tunnels. WHRO's Ryan Murphy was there.
Crews of Spaniards who have been working on digging this tunnel for the last year waved Spanish flags and cheered as the 3-story tall boring machine, nicknamed Mary, broke through the concrete and into fresh air. Project Director Ryan Banis says they feel like they're making history.
What we just heard today was the boom heard around Hampton Roads. I mean, that's what you heard here. We've been waiting on this for almost 30 years to see this progress since the early 90s.
That's one 8,000-foot tunnel finished, but Mary's work isn't done. Over the next 5 months, she'll execute the world's longest 3-point turn. Then she'll dig her way back to the Norfolk side. VDOT expects the work on the expansion to continue until at least fall of 2026. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Ship repair is crucial to the region's economy, and like other major industries, there's always a critical need for skilled trades workers. A new competition is working to showcase career opportunities to middle and high school students. WHRO's Barry Graham has more.
Private sector shipbuilding and repair is big business in Hampton Roads. According to a State of the Region report, it accounts for about 15% of the total value of the area's economic activity. More than 160 ship construction and repair firms are in the region, and approximately 25,000 people are employed through it. Billy Bingham is with the Virginia ship repair industry. He cites the critical importance of it to Hampton Roads.
We are an industry that is vastly important to not just this area and this community, but also just a nation as a whole, as we provide national security, as we repair these boats and vessels that need to be prepped and ready to go. If being wartime ready too, with whatever the future may hold. So we are a very, very needed industry that needs hardworking individuals that can think outside the box.
Like other trade-based industries, an alarm has been sounded over the lack of skilled available workers in ship repair. Electricians, plumbers, welders, and construction workers are needed. Chris Murray, who works as an instructor for the ship repair industry, says it's a global problem in finding workers.
Being in the industry, you watched it steadily decline. That the fact that across the country, let alone around the world, simple trades have become so shorthanded. Finding the mechanic, finding the welder, finding the electrician. Everybody wants to sit behind a desk. They don't want to get their hands dirty.
Murray helped launch an innovative method to attract students into the ship repair and skilled trades field by helping to start a competition, one where kids could address an issue in the industry and apply problem-solving skills to it. This year, 9 schools competed. The finals were held March 21st, with the teams presenting their projects. St. Matthew's School won with their unique pod propulsion steering system. They cited how it could have prevented countless ship tragedies like the iconic Titanic sinking. Carrie Martin, the faculty sponsor from Page Middle School, says learning collaboration and how to work in a team environment is key learning for students.
Because they learn how to work together, which is it's a workplace readiness skill, teamwork skills, and I feel like that's one of the biggest takeaways from the competition is they learn teamwork skills, and also they learn so much from the research that they conduct prior to coming to the competition.
High schooler Jay Samus said after competing, he's much more aware of career opportunities in the skilled trades.
I'm way more aware of, all the opportunities it has, and it's almost like a never-ending industry. Something always needs to happen, whether it's with the Navy or shipbuilding or repair. It definitely opens your eyes to a lot of things.
High school student Rachel Warren said she learned about the many skilled trade jobs available through the ship industry.
There's a lot of opportunities and that I've been made aware of between the shipyard and the apprenticeship programs. There's just lots of different things, and you can do almost anything in this industry specifically, whether that's pipe fitting or welding or just construction in general. There's just so many different opportunities, and I've definitely learned that throughout this process.
Chris Murray says it's inspiring to see the innovation and ideas from the students, and maybe a glimmer of hope for an industry that needs to attract a skilled workforce.
I've known engineers for 20 and 30 years and that don't have the desire and drive, let alone some of the ideas that these young kids come up with.
For WHRO News, I'm Barry Graham.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Ryan Murphy, Catherine Hafner, Mechelle Hankerson, and Barry Graham, and WUNC's Colin Campbell. Also Connor Worley, who produced today's program. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed, and you can get your news updates at WHRO.org and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.